That morning at Henderson Memorial Hospital began like any other. Everything was quiet until a sudden alarm echoed through the hallway. Someone had collapsed, and the people responsible were nowhere to be found. Then, someone without permission stepped forward. 3 hours later, an emergency meeting was called, and by the end of the day, the entire hospital had to face a question no one dared to answer directly. What matters more, following protocol or doing what's right? What do you think? Welcome to NT, where everyday kindness becomes unforgettable. Let's begin this journey together. Tuesday mornings at Henderson Memorial Hospital always had a certain hush to them. The kind of hush that clings to quiet towns like Asheville, North Carolina, where the mountains watch over everything and people still wave to each other at crosswalks. Inside the hospital, that quiet was broken only by the soft squeak of sneakers on linoleum and the occasional beep from a heart monitor starting its daily song. Nurse Emily Foster had just started her shift. At 31, she had 7 years of nursing experience and a reputation for doing things by the book, except when the book got in the way of doing the right thing. She wore her scrubs neat, her brown hair pulled back in a clean bun, and a sunflower pin tucked just above her name tag. A small reminder, she once said, to look for light, even in fluorescent-lit hallways. At 7:42 a.m., a new patient arrived on a stretcher. The transport orderlies wheeled him down the east wing. A thin, weathered man with sun-spotted hands and an oxygen tube beneath his nose. His hat, faded and fraying at the edges, read Vietnam Veteran. His name was Walter Briggs, 79, admitted for cardiac evaluation after a recent series of syncopal episodes, fainting spells, as folks more plainly put it. Emily wasn't assigned to Walter. Her hands were full with 2 post-op patients down the hall, but as she passed by with a clipboard tucked under her arm, she caught a glance she'd seen too many times before. The barely there tremble of fingers, the shallow rise of a chest trying to hold on, the look in a man's eyes that said his body was about to let go. Then, just as she stepped past, a sound sliced the hallway flatline. No one moved, no doctor nearby, no assigned nurse, just Emily. And she didn't wait. The hallway had gone quiet again, but for a very different reason. Walter Briggs was stable. His heartbeat, once a flat line, now registered as a soft, steady rhythm on the monitor beside him. A small victory in a world where victories were measured in seconds and oxygen levels. Emily Foster stood at the foot of his stretcher, scrubs damp with sweat, hands slightly trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She had done what any trained nurse would do when a life was slipping away in front of them. But not every room in a hospital runs on heart. Supervisor Denise Halbrook arrived with the click of polished heels and the kind of energy that made hallways tense up. Her eyes locked on Emily. No warmth, no curiosity, just policy. "Why were you in contact with this patient?" she asked, not bothering with hello. Emily opened her mouth, still trying to catch her breath, but Denise raised a hand before she could answer. "He wasn't on your chart. That bed is under the East Cardio Unit. You're assigned to post-surgical recovery." There were no doctors in the hallway, Emily said softly. No nurses nearby. "I didn't have time to check." "You didn't have authority," Denise snapped, her voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. "You violated protocol. This is a liability issue." That word, liability, echoed louder than the flatline had. By 9:00 a.m., Emily was sitting under fluorescent lights in a conference room that smelled faintly of printer ink and dust, 5 seats across from her. HR, legal, admin, risk management, and Denise sitting squarely in the middle like she'd been waiting for this moment. The tone was sterile, official. They reviewed her employment file, 7 years, no write-ups, multiple commendations, but none of that mattered now. A decision had already been made before she entered the room. Emily's voice stayed steady. He was coding. I reacted. That's what we're trained to do. The head of HR shifted in her seat. We're not questioning your intentions, Nurse Foster, but your actions place the hospital at legal risk. Until we complete an internal review, we're placing you on administrative suspension. Effective immediately. Denise slid a paper across the table. Her ID badge was taken. Her shift ended right there. No thank you. No recognition. Just silence. But as Emily gathered her things and stepped out into the hallway, she didn't notice the man watching from a nearby bench, mid-60s, crisp navy blue suit, veteran's pin on his lapel. The same eyes as the man she'd just saved. His name was Henry Briggs, Walter's younger brother, and the call he was placing was to someone with stars on their shoulders. The administrative wing of Henderson Memorial wasn't used to surprises. Most days, it functioned like clockwork. Meetings at the hour, decisions made in hushed tones behind glass walls, and paperwork that seemed to multiply overnight. But by 11 o'clock a.m. Tuesday had already strayed far from routine. It started with a sound no one expected, the deliberate rhythm of highly polished shoes echoing down the corridor. Staff turned their heads as a tall man in full military dress uniform stepped through the front entrance with quiet authority. His chest bore medals that caught the fluorescent light like they had a story to tell. He carried a small wooden box under one arm and a sealed government envelope in the other. The name tag on his chest read, Colonel Franklin Rhodes, U.S. Army, retired. He approached the front desk calmly. I need to speak with your hospital director, he said, voice firm but respectful. The receptionist blinked. Is this regarding a patient, sir? It's regarding a matter of honor, and a nurse named Emily Foster. Within minutes, a ripple of whispers swept through the hospital. Colonel Rhodes was escorted to the same conference room where Emily had been suspended just hours before, but this time the seats were fuller. The hospital's director, board representatives, and legal counsel all took their places with an unease that hadn't been there earlier. Emily was called back in. She walked into the room with no badge, no authority, just the memory of a heartbeat she'd helped bring back. Colonel Rhodes stood to greet her. You don't know me, he said, but you saved my brother's life. He turned to the others. Walter Briggs served in Vietnam. He was a staff sergeant who carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire after his chopper was shot down in '71. Shrapnel in his leg, burns on his back. He refused evacuation until every man was out. The colonel opened the wooden box, revealing a Purple Heart resting against velvet. Then he placed a small USB drive on the table. This contains hallway security footage. It clearly shows that Nurse Foster followed every emergency protocol with precision, when no one else did. A beat of silence. Then, he added quietly, in the military we have a phrase, initiative in the absence of orders. It's what we teach our best. Because sometimes, saving a life means stepping forward, even when no one tells you to. Emily said nothing. She didn't have to. For the first time all morning, the room didn't feel cold. It felt seen. The meeting room no longer felt like a courtroom. After Colonel Rhodes shared his brother's story and the footage that proved Emily's every move had been measured and correct, the air had shifted. Not just from discomfort, but something deeper. Recognition. The hospital director, a woman known more for strategic planning than sentiment, cleared her throat. Her voice wasn't as steady as it had been that morning. In light of this new information, Nurse Foster's suspension is lifted immediately. We owe you more than just an apology. But Colonel Rhodes didn't sit back. He leaned forward. No, ma'am, lifting a suspension isn't enough. You don't just undo a message by erasing a decision, you replace it with something better. He paused, then turned to Emily. What this nurse did shouldn't be questioned. It should be taught. The room grew still. It was the hospital's head of emergency services who finally spoke. "Colonel, you're right. We've built a system that delays care in the name of caution. It's time that changed." What followed wasn't some grand gesture, no medals, no media. It was something far more lasting: policy. By the end of that week, Henderson Memorial quietly rolled out an amendment to its emergency care protocol. A single-page memo. Clear, uncomplicated. The Emily Red Code. Effective immediately, any nurse certified in advanced life support is authorized to initiate emergency care procedures without delay, regardless of patient assignment, when no attending physician is present and life is at risk. The first copy was posted in the East Cardio Unit, next to the hallway where Walter Briggs had flatlined. By the time Emily returned to work 2 days later, something had changed. Not just on paper, but in people. Fellow nurses greeted her with nods, not whispers. Residents asked her quiet questions in passing. "How did you know what to do so fast? What was it like? Would you do it again?" And she always gave the same answer. "I didn't have time to ask permission. I just knew someone needed help." That Friday afternoon, a folded copy of the new protocol was left in her locker. On the bottom corner, written in pen, "You didn't just save him. You saved us, too." No signature, but she didn't need one. The beeping in room 214 was steady now. A soft, rhythmic sound that meant things were holding together. Emily stood by the doorway, clipboard in hand, but her eyes were on the man in the hospital bed. Walter Briggs had regained color in his cheeks, though his breath was still a little shallow. His veteran's cap now rested neatly on the tray beside him, and his hand, veined and sun-spotted, lay quietly atop the blanket. When he opened his eyes and spotted Emily, a slow smile crossed his weathered face. "You're the one," he whispered. Emily stepped closer, adjusting his IV line out of habit. "I'm just a nurse, Mr. Briggs," he chuckled, raspy but alive. "I've pulled men out of helicopters under fire, sweetheart. I've dragged them through mud and gunfire, and never once thought I'd be the one needing saving." His eyes glistened. "But you didn't blink." She didn't answer right away, just reached out and placed her hand over his, a quiet gesture, simple and honest. "That's how it works," she said. "We look out for each other." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills outside Asheville, the hospital's shift change filled the corridors with low voices and rolling carts. Emily walked past the nurses' station, where Denise Halbrook stood waiting. But the sharpness in Denise's posture was gone. Her eyes lowered slightly as she stepped forward. "Nurse Foster," she said, voice soft, "I owe you, not just an apology, I owe you a correction." She turned to face the staff gathering for their evening reports. 3 days ago, Emily made a choice that saved a life. I responded by punishing her. I was wrong. From today forward, that kind of courage will no longer be punished here. There was a pause. Then, from the back of the group, someone started clapping. Another joined, and then another, until the hallway filled with the sound of hands meeting, not for celebration, but for understanding. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she didn't shrink. She stood quietly, like someone who hadn't asked for praise. Only the chance to do the right thing. Some heroes don't arrive with sirens or spotlights. Sometimes they show up in scrubs and just don't wait. Because of one decision, a man lived. A hospital changed. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone flatlines in a hallway, a nurse won't wonder if she's allowed to act. She'll know. Not all battles are fought in the field. Some take place in fluorescent-lit hallways, behind clipboards and policy binders, where the enemy isn't chaos. It's hesitation. It's fear of doing the wrong thing, even when you know what the right thing is. Emily Foster didn't save Walter Briggs because she had permission. She didn't stop to weigh consequences or worry about forms. She just saw a human life on the line and acted with the training, instinct, and compassion that made her a nurse in the first place. And because she didn't wait, a man lived. But the story didn't end there. It wasn't just a flat line reversed. It was a ripple. One act of courage led to a change in policy, a shift in culture, and a reminder to everyone in that hospital that rules should never stand in the way of humanity. That's the part that stays with you. Not the applause, not the protocol, but the quiet truth. Sometimes the system only changes when one person chooses to act. It makes you wonder, how many lives could be different if more people followed what was right instead of what was allowed? Comment one word if you believe that doing the right thing can spark meaningful change. And if this story moved you, even just a little, consider subscribing to NT Amazing Stories. Here, we honor those quiet moments of courage, those split-second decisions that echo far beyond the hallway, because the world needs more stories where humanity wins, more stories where kindness isn't a weakness, it's the reason someone gets to go home. And if you're still here, thank you for listening. Truly. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay brave, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of doing what's right, even when no one's watching.